Hey everybody, welcome. If you have just finished writing your book and you are getting ready to submit to literary agents, I am so glad we found each other. Today, I am going to talk about 5 benchmarks that literary agents look for to determine if your story might be one they can represent. And at the end of this, I'm going to offer you a free diagnostic tool that you can run your story through to decide if it's ready for submission. So let's just jump right in. So I'm a developmental editor and book coach. And what I notice when I look at people's first pages is oftentimes they have so much information up inside of their heads. In other words, you know your characters so well, you know your story, its setting, the people who matter inside of it, that sometimes it's really easy to forget to put it all on the page. And so, what I find oftentimes is those first pages can be a little bit confusing, and agents are looking for clarity on those first pages. The opposite of what they want to feel is confused. They don't want to flail around trying to figure out where they are or who they're looking at. They want to understand who we are with in that specific moment on that first page. Where are we, and what is happening right here, right now? In other words, this is not a place for backstory or complicated overviews. We want to immerse the reader instantly. So let me start off with an example that lacks clarity. The morning felt different. Everything seemed slightly off, like the air had shifted in a way she couldn't explain. So these sentences look okay at first glance, but when we start to unpack them and think the way a literary agent would, or even a really careful reader, we start to see the problems. For one, we don't know who she is. She doesn't have a name, she doesn't have an age, we can't see her. I am seeing this more and more where writers are starting with the pronoun she or he or they, and doing it almost as this way to sort of layer in this mystery. 9 times out of 10, it's needlessly confusing and doesn't have quite the stylistic impact that we often think it is when we're writing it this way. So we want to know who your character is. Give her a name, give her a face. Let us connect with this person. We don't know where she is, and we don't really know what's happening. This is just all very vague. And of course, anytime I'm talking about anything in writing, I want to add the caveat that there are exceptions to all the rules. What I'm giving you here is kind of a rundown of what agents are typically looking for. But we're artists, we're writers, we can break rules, but we need to understand the rules first. And typically, these 3 details, who, where, what, they ground the reader, they ground the literary agent, and they make everyone feel comfortable and ready for an exciting story. So, a stronger example here would be something like Emma stood in the hospital hallway outside her father's room, holding the discharge papers she hadn't agreed to sign. Do you feel that difference? All that specificity. Now we are in that scene. And instead of having these really kind of boring questions of where are we? Who is this? What's going on? We are focused on something specific that's interesting, that grabs our attention. It's a hook that makes us turn the page. We have a clear setting, a clear situation, and immediate tension. And that, my friends, is what agents are looking for. Benchmark number 2 is we want to know what your character wants, and we want to know it right away. This doesn't mean we're looking for their life goal or some monumental wish or dream. We're looking for a scene level objective. What is that character trying to do in that very moment? And that's because this is going to make your story more propulsive. You can put obstacles in front of them. We're going to start to root for them, or maybe not root for them. We're going to start to feel an emotion, though, that's aligned with whatever it is they are trying to do in that moment. And that connects the reader with the story. And of course, that's what agents want to see. They want to make sure you know how to do that. So let's look at an example of a weak sentence. He thought about how everything had gone wrong lately. The problem is, this is a reflection. It's showing us an emotion that he is feeling, but we don't have any action. We don't see the cause of it. We're not seeing it move him to do something in particular. And so, without those other details, the emotion just by itself, this reflection just by itself, is really not that compelling. A stronger way to do this would be he reread the email and started typing a response, then deleted it. If he sent it, he'd lose the job. If he didn't, he'd lose the truth. So here we still have some of that interiority. We're still connecting with him on an emotional level, but we also have these details that show us his clear, immediate goal is, which is to figure out, yes, he responds and loses something, or no, he doesn't respond and loses something. These stakes are inherently embedded in the choice that he's going to make. So we're getting this emotional complexity, we're getting these feelings, but we're also getting stakes, and stakes are what the agent needs to see. Benchmark number three, something is making that goal difficult. And this is where resistance comes in. Agents are always going to be looking for friction and pressure that comes with high stakes and that costs your character something. In other words, your character is going to lose something for making the choices that they do. So here's an example where the effort falls a little flat. She wanted to leave town, but it was complicated. Complicated is really vague. I mean, complicated could mean that her map was difficult to read, or complicated could mean that she was leaving a dysfunctional family who was threatening her if she left, right? Like there's different stages of complication. Because we're just using this vague, uninteresting term, there's no real obstacle that the reader can envision. And so the stakes feel lower, even if the complication is actually something really significant. A stronger way to write this would be, she could leave tonight. The bus was at 9, but her sister was still inside, and if she walked out now, she wasn't coming back. So here, it's still a little mysterious. We don't know everything that's happening, but we know that there are physical obstacles that are making this decision more complicated. And we also know that there is going to be some emotional fallout no matter what this character does. There is a real cost to the choice that she's going to make. And of course, that's what makes stories interesting, and that's what agents are looking for. Benchmark number four, we're inside the character's mind, and that adds meaning. So agents are always asking, what is it that we are learning about this character in this particular scene that is deepening a moment and not just repeating something we already know? In other words, we don't want just feelings like we saw in that last slide. We want to see the author's interpretation of it. We want to see how the author's interpretation of the character's feelings leads to the next moment, the next act of transformation for that character. So here's an example that we want to avoid. She felt nervous and unsure what to do. Again, this is just really generic emotional labeling. If we don't understand the nervousness, if we can't picture it, if we can't be there inside the scene with that character, we are not having a very visceral or authentic experience of what that situation is rendering the scene with. So now here's a stronger example. If she knocked, everything would change. If she didn't, she could pretend none of this had happened. Okay, that's a big difference, right? Now her thoughts are actually revealing the stakes that are taking place in this scene. And that shapes exactly how we read this moment. And it keeps us on the edge of our seats wondering, what is she going to do? So again, the way that the more developed sentence is operating, it's making everything more propulsive, more interesting, and it's moving us forward. And I want to be very clear, if you are writing a quieter story, a piece of literary fiction, you can adapt this to be appropriate for a quieter story. It's not that every single scene has to be a bank heist, but it does need to have these elements to move your story forward. Can look a lot of different ways, but it does need to be forward moving. Okay, so benchmark number five is super important. This is probably the one that I go over with my clients most of all, and that is every scene should contain some element of change or transformation. If your character is going through something at the beginning of the scene, we want to see them moving forward by the end of the scene. They may be deeper into the problem. They may have found a solution, a decision that they're going to act on, but something, there needs to be some kind of movement, good or bad, backwards or forwards, sideways, it doesn't matter. The point is there needs to be motion. So a weak scene might, we've all read stories that sort of start to drag, and that can be when there's not enough momentum in a scene. For example, we might see a scene where the character worries a lot and the character has lots of thoughts, but at the end of the scene, they're still in the same place they were. And that can be reality, right? Sometimes people don't just solve their problems in one scene. That wouldn't be reality. That wouldn't even be an interesting story. But if your character stays stuck, something around them inevitably changes. Maybe the person that they're stuck around gets more frustrated, or maybe because they're stuck by indecision, an opportunity passes them by. So it doesn't mean that your character has to change necessarily, but something in their midst needs to be impacted by whatever it is they are going through. So a stronger scene might be she knocked, the door opened, it wasn't her sister. So this works because action was taken. She made a decision to knock. New information was provided. Someone, we don't know who, but we know it wasn't her sister, appears. And now, because of that, the situation shifts. Again, your scene may not be as dramatic as that. It may have quieter undertone that signals a change, but we need to have something that has happened because there needs to be some consequence. Okay, so once you have looked through your manuscript and looked for these benchmarks, you're going to want to put it all together. Oftentimes, agents will ask for your first 20 or 50 pages, and in those pages, they are looking for these benchmarks. So, your strong opening is going to be doing these five things simultaneously. It's going to be making it clear to the agent what the situation is. Where does it take place? Who are we supposed to root for? We're going to understand that the character wants something, and we're going to have a vague notion of what the obstacles are in the way, or at least what the character thinks the obstacles are. We're going to have some access to their interiority, so we understand what's at stake and we connect with those characters and really feel for what they're going through. And we're going to get a sense that that situation they're in is already starting to shift. We're not going to spend too much time in backstory or explanation. We're going to avoid info dumps by really getting into whatever the circumstances are that are starting to make your characters' lives shift. And those are some of the key elements that an agent is going to be looking for. It's no guarantee, of course, but it will certainly set you apart from lots and lots of manuscripts that they receive each day. If this was helpful, I'm going to give you a link to this free resource to use as a diagnostic tool to test if your book is ready to submit. It goes over the key elements that we just talked about and gives you some ideas for questions you can ask as you drill down and really look carefully at your manuscript to decide, is it time yet? And if it's not time, you'll get some ideas from this guide that will help you figure out how to tackle those revisions so that you can get it ready for submission. And just one last thing, every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern, the writers in my community get together for a free writing sprint from 3 o'clock Eastern to 4 o'clock. We hop on, we write together. It is a super focused, super fun, laid back hour of connection and writing. And if you would like to join us, we would love to have you there. There's a link to this free group in the comments section as well. Keep in touch. Happy writing.